my team. Welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. Great to have your company. As always, I'm your host, Matt Hamilton, and we're going to do things a little bit differently today. I want to really zero in on some practical measures for you guys, and the topic is going to be your leadership approach and 5 focus points for the first 30 days of your leadership career. Now, this isn't just going to be applicable for those of you who are leading for the very first time. This will also serve as a really useful episode if you are jumping into a new leadership position and you've already got some experience under your belt and you just want to refine what you have to focus on, or if you feel like things in your leadership career have started to get a little bit stale. Every now and then we need to revisit the approach that we're taking and look at ways to freshen it up. You know, maybe you have noticed that the team aren't super enthusiastic about team meetings anymore. Maybe you've noticed that, you know, they don't seem to be getting a lot of value from one-on-ones and they don't seem particularly keen to engage in that either. There could be numerous things that have got your spidey senses tingling and have made you think, maybe I just need to have a little bit of a refresh with respect to my approach, and maybe you want some guidance on some things that you should focus on. So if that is the case, this episode is for you. Now, normally we would get started with a real-world practical example. Not today. Instead, what's driven this episode is some questions that have come up on this topic multiple times on some of the leadership forums that I am a member of. It's a great little harvesting tool to see what's on the collective minds of those of us in leadership. And this was one of the ones that resonated strongly was, what should I focus on when I'm in a new leadership position, or if I need to freshen things up? So we're going to dive into that today. So without further ado, let's get started. So point number 1, and this is going to depend on each individual in your team and how they view it from a value perspective. But the first thing I want you to focus on is the one-on-one meetings with individuals within your team. Now, this is really going to depend on the size of your team. If you've got more than 10 people to manage, it starts to get really difficult to implement, to schedule time on top of all your other management duties, to sit down with each individual and check in with them and see how they're going. So given it's a little bit inefficient, and given that there are some people who find it more valuable than others, what I want you to do is I want you to make them optional. All right, so leave it in the employee's court. And what that's going to do is it's going to free up your time. It's going to make it clear that it's not an obligation. It's not a mandatory thing that your team members have to do. So it takes the pressure off them. And it also means that you're not going to be struggling to find things to talk about, right? Because if the employee values that one-on-one time, presumably they have a really good reason for wanting to catch up with you, and they have a bunch of topics that they want to raise with you in that one-on-one setting that perhaps they're not comfortable raising in a team meeting style setup with everybody else around. So I would suggest make your one-on-ones optional, and that will free up your time, and it will also mean that those in your team who you do still have the one-on-ones with, it's going to be a much more productive and worthwhile meeting because they are coming to it with some concerns that they need resolution to, or some questions that they're seeking answers for. So make them one-on-one. Secondly, on a similar topic but focusing on the team-wide approach, I want you to make sure that your team meetings are efficient. So what I like to do is I have a team-wide meeting where everybody preferably gets together in person in the same room. It is okay if they want to join on Teams, but I do prefer that we're in the room together and on site. And what we'll do is we will run a team meeting, but I've recalibrated it in recent times to get rid of some slack that I saw creeping into the system. So a big focus on time efficiency. We used to have an hour and a half scheduled for our team meetings, but I thought that really gave permission for people to be a little bit ill-disciplined, rocking up late, not sticking to, say, 2 or 3 key things with respect to points that they raised. We would have situations where people would sort of go off on tangents about things that were really only specifically relevant to them and maybe one other person in the meeting. And I saw a need to address this. So what I did was I imposed a relentless focus on efficiency with structure. And what that means is, number one, we cut the time back from an hour and a half to 1 hour. So that, just by virtue of the shorter time frame we have to work in, means that we have to be more disciplined with respect to how we run that meeting. So we cut it back to an hour. The expectation was made very clear in writing that my expectation is we start on time every time. And if you're not there at the start time, we will get started without you, because it's not fair to be disrespectful of other people's time when they have arrived on time at the meeting, and most likely have a follow-up meeting to get to straight afterwards. Very common. So relentless focus on efficiency and starting on time, being respectful of our time and the time of other people. And then when I say structure, I mean an agenda. All right, so what I do is I circulate an agenda before we head into the meeting. And what that means is people will have a bit of an idea as to what we're going to cover ahead of time. They can ask questions, or rather think of questions they want to ask in relation to that agenda ahead of time. And how we document those questions is we have a Excel file saved on OneDrive. And what that means is people can have a look at the agenda and think of any other unrelated, any other business questions that they might want to raise. And they can table those under their name in the OneDrive file. And then basically we will close submissions essentially 24 hours before the meeting. And then I will be able to review it and come up with my responses so that I can give them a really good answer to their queries before we get into the meeting. So that's just a really good example of how we can eliminate that time that is wasted in meetings as people sort of think on their feet and then perhaps raise things out of order. And we can get it a little bit more structured and organized and time efficient just by putting in some forethought ahead of our meetings. On top of that, I don't want to discourage the ability for people to speak openly in an open the floor style setting. So we're looking to find the balance. Yes, I want structure. Yes, I want to be time efficient. Yes, I want you to get your questions in and things tabled on the agenda before we even get into the room. But I don't want to completely eliminate the ability that people have to speak openly and freely and off the cuff in those settings. But what we need to do is essentially the best we can. So we give them an agenda, we give them structure, and then we say, if you are going to raise things off the cuff in that meeting environment, please keep it to a maximum of 3 things per person. So we give a little leeway to speak freely and on things that are perhaps not listed on the agenda or on the any other business spreadsheet, but we keep it under tight control by setting parameters in place. So do that, and I think you'll find that people will go, well, look, yes, I'm busy. I've got a lot of other things in terms of competing priorities to deal with that might challenge my desire to get together in the same room as my teammates and just talk about things as a team. But at least it's run well. At least it's structured. At least I'm getting value from it because I have the opportunity to table things that I need answers to. Or if I don't have anything that I want to come up that's of interest to me in that meeting, at least I know that it's going to be run for no longer than an hour and other people are going to get value out of it. Very useful and sends all the right signals, right? Which is that we are under control, we're disciplined, we're getting together for a purpose and not just to tick a box to say that we have met. So very important. The third thing I want to focus on is measurement. You might have heard the saying, you cannot manage what you can't measure. And I do think that there is a lot of truth to that. So what I want you to focus on in the first 30 days is I want you to figure out what tool or system works best for you and your team that will help you to monitor and measure the workload that you are asking of your team. So for me, that's going to be something like Microsoft Planner. Really useful system, ties in with Microsoft Teams and the whole Office suite. And it's really, really good for assigning multiple owners to certain task buckets. So I won't go through it in too much detail here on the podcast, but I will encourage you, if you've not seen it before, to go away, do a bit of a Google and have a bit of a play with Microsoft Planner. It is an excellent tool and gives really, really great visibility for multiple task owners, and their ability to update the status of those tasks as they go through the steps that they need to complete the process. So for example, you can have buckets under names if you like. You can have buckets under certain categories, whether it be travel, bookings, operational matters, facilities management, whatever the bucket might be. And then underneath those buckets, you can assign specific tasks and then whoever you would like in your team to that task. So you can have 4 or 5 task owners if you'd like, simply by inputting the email address in that task bucket. And then underneath that, you can write a bit of a spiel about what the task is for, and then you can have in bullet point format underneath that setup specific steps that need to be completed on the way to that task completion. So it's just a really great way to manage and measure the workload of your team in a way that's decentralized. So the benefit of this is, yes, you have oversight, yes, you can view what's going on as a leader, but also it means that those who are in charge of managing the task directly, because you've got multiple task owners as an option, and because it's available and visible to all, and you have a regular status update along the way that everybody can access, it means that if someone takes unexpected sick leave or something of that nature, it's not difficult, provided you update it regularly, to see, okay, where are we up to with that task? So someone else can pick it up, or you as a manager can go and delegate according to the status of that task and have a really good idea of where you're at. So it's a really important thing as a leader to be able to measure what is going on in your team and their world. And the other real important point I want to touch on just quickly with that is that someone can say, look, I'm really busy, I need help. But if you don't understand what their workload looks like, how can you be of appropriate assistance? Are you just taking the word of this person? Is it possible that they're not as good from a time management perspective as somebody else in your team who is just as busy, if not more busy, but doesn't complain? And we are humans, we are fallible, and that is a reality as a leader that we need to be cognizant of. Some people are not as good at managing their time and their tasks as others. So it's quite possible you'll have someone who has literally 2 to 3 times the workload of that person who complains all the time, but because they're efficient, they get things done, and usually with half the stress. So being able to quantify what everybody has going on is a really, really handy thing to have when it comes to digging into the reasons behind that workload stress a little bit more and going, okay, do we need to improve your ability to manage time and your tasks and give you some help and structure around that? Or do we actually need to hire more people? Very handy to have the tools in place that will enable you as a manager to understand that better and then make really good hiring choices. So Microsoft Planner, dig into that, have a look, recommend it highly. Number 4 on the list is I want you to clarify the mission statement. So I don't want to get all sort of military on you, but I just think it's a really good term, the mission statement. So what do I mean by that? What does your team exist to do? What are you striving for together as a group to achieve? You have to understand the mission statement and understand what you're trying to achieve so that you know where the goalposts are. You need to understand what good looks like. So make it crystal clear as a leader what the gold standard is. What are you guys trying to achieve? Clarity of purpose is huge. And sometimes people just need a little bit of a reminder with that. You know, I used to have a team that I worked for in a big facilities management company. And oftentimes these guys would receive an overall mission statement, you could say, from the executive level. And they would struggle to understand how those high-level goals were able to be impacted by us on the floor. And so my job as a leader was to go, okay, yes, these are high-level organizational-wide goals. You know, it might be something like improve efficiency or, achieve a average review score of X. But in the facilities management world, the hands-on world, the team had very little understanding of, how can I affect those goals? This just seems like management speak. And we were able to together go through how we could affect the outcome at our level. It might be, for example, responding to work orders within a certain time frame. It might be not walking past a job that hasn't been rectified and seems to have remained in that state for a long period of time. Interrogate why that is. Find out what the status of that job is. It might be walking past a problem that doesn't have any work order logged against it, and instead of waiting for the customer to log the job, proactively logging it yourself and rectifying it. It could be something as simple as a light globe that's blown or a fluorescent tube that is flickering. So we were able to distill these goals that were set at the executive level, break down what it means for us at our level, and then come to a mutually agreeable stance on how we could achieve it and contribute in our team. So clarify your mission statement, understand and agree upon what good looks like. And point number 5, and this is crucial. If you don't do this, everything else falls down. Understand that as the leader, you set the tone. You cannot just talk all this talk and not live the values out and lead by example for your team. Because this is how respect is lost or never gained in the first place. If you say, hey, I want you to do X, and then you do B, they go, well, if it's not good enough for you, then why should we do it? People don't like hypocrisy, so model the behavior, live the values that you preach. And if you can do that, people will want to follow you. They will be inspired by your example. All right, guys, we'll leave it there. I hope that is handy. A very practically oriented episode today. And let me know how you go. Send the show a message, send us a text. It's the link at the top of the episode description that I leave in every episode. Follow the show on social media, Instagram to be precise, and join the Exceptional Leadership Community of Practice on LinkedIn. The link is also in the show description if you're interested in that. And as I always say, guys, hit the subscribe button. We do have a few listeners who I know listen to the show, and I can tell this because of the show's analytics. We have quite a few of you who listen fairly regularly but haven't hit the subscribe button. So if you could hit that subscribe button if you get value from the show, understand that it does help a podcast like mine, and perhaps leave us a 5-star review if you're feeling really generous. And before I go, I will ask one other favor, and that is to share the show far and wide. If you think of someone who could, for example, get benefit from this episode, or if you think the show is just something that people would benefit from knowing about, share it far and wide, share it on your socials, tell a friend, tell 10 friends. Let's together pull in the same direction and raise the standard of leadership globally. But wherever you are listening to me from, I want to thank you once again for joining me. And until next time, I'll say see you later.